Hi, everybody. It's Christina. Happy Friday. I am so excited to be here. It is the final day for the Summer of Magic 2019. If you are just now joining me, could you let me know in the comments below if you can hear and see me okay? Can I get a sound check? Hi, Jennifer. Good to see you. Hi. I hope you're doing well this Friday. So I'm curious, what has been your guys' favorite discussions so far? Let me know in the comments down below. What have been your favorite discussions so far? Okay, thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. Hi, Brittany. Good to see you. Okay, we have some people coming in. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jessica. Hi, Mario. Good to see you. Happy Friday. Hi, Elizabeth. Good to see you guys. Welcome, welcome. Come on in. Let me know in the comments below what has been your favorite presentation so far. What god or goddess or primordial being have you really enjoyed learning the most about this week? Or what god or goddess or primordial being have you learned about this week that you maybe didn't know about before? Vesta and Persephone, yeah, Vesta was awesome. I've got some ice cold raspberry hibiscus tea in here, and it is so good. I love my little unicorn mug. All right, so it looks like everybody's starting to come in here. So let's go ahead and get started. Today we're going to be talking about Odin, but first I want to do the giveaway for the people that are going to win a workshop from last Monday. Okay, so there's going to be another question for today. Another 3 people can enter to win. So if you don't win today, you can enter to win again. And then on next week at some point, probably I'll give you guys until next Friday. So next Friday, I will go ahead and give away 3 more workshops. So the workshops that you have to choose from, let me type them out. So you have the astrology of tarot, the numerology of tarot. You have give the most epic tarot readings for love and relationships. That one's a really good one. You also have give the most epic tarot readings for Halloween, and that one's about to get a new update to it. So we're getting into Halloween season, so around September or so, I'm going to be updating that module. We're going to be doing similar to the Valentine's Day one, where I walk you through how to do a funnel and give you some blog ideas or live stream ideas and things like that. It's going to be the same thing, but it's going to be Halloween themed. And then there's one more, and that's give the most epic most epic tarot readings for chakra healing. And it starts to, like, if you've ever wanted to learn a little bit about Kabbalah, it talks about Kabbalah, and it talks about like chakras and things like that, and how to do really, really great chakra readings with tarot cards utilizing Kabbalah. So here are all of the workshops that we have. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that you can choose from. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is I went through everybody's comment. I put a heart by your comment to let you know that I saw it. And I have added everybody into a wheel. And that's just the most fair way to do it, in my opinion, because it was really difficult to choose just one because everybody had like really good answers. So I put everybody into a wheel. And let's see. All right. Can everybody let me know that you can see the wheel? Can you see the wheel? Okay, it looks like it's coming up on my end. All right, so the first winner is going to be Elizabeth Booth. Elizabeth Booth. And you guys can claim whatever workshop that you want. Hi, Susan. Good to see you. Okay, so if we pull the same winner again, what I'll just respin it. Okay, so the second winner is Luann Morris. Luann, you win a workshop of your choice, and I will be following up. I won't give them out today. I'll give them out Monday. Okay, so if you are watching this replay and you did win, just PM me, private inbox me, send me a friend request first, and then inbox me the workshop that you want, and then I will send it out to you guys on Monday, okay? So the next and final winner for Monday is Jessica Luna. Jessica Luna, you win a workshop. All right, so get with me, winners, and I will get that to you on Monday. And if you didn't win, you still have another chance to win. I'll be picking 3 more people from today's workshop, and I'll be doing the winners on next Friday. Okay? So you still have a really, really good chance to win. Thank you guys for participating. I really enjoyed giving these workshops away, and I know that you're going to really love them because they are like anywhere between 2 and 3 hours long, and they each come with a workbook and everything. So there's a lot of information in them. Hey Paula, good to see you guys. Thank you, Susan, for tagging. All right, so let's go ahead and get started and talk about Odin. So let me know in the comments below, do any of you work with Odin? Have any of you worked with Odin before? Have any of you done any research on Odin? I'm trying to gauge like where you guys are at in terms of how much you do know about Odin. So let me know in the comments below, put a comment in there and tell me, have you worked with Odin? Do you know much about Odin? Is this brand new to you? Let me know what you guys think. Congratulations to all winners. Hi Monique, good to see you. So Odin is mostly known as the Norse god. But that's kind of a reconstructionist point of view of Odin. Odin is actually a lot older than the Norse Odin that we have. We know him today as kind of a war god. So there's a lot of different, actually Odin is kind of like a god of a lot of different things. He's kind of like the catch-all god. That's why he's called the All-Father. He has his hands in a little bit of everything, right? So Odin is actually based off of a much more ancient god named Wotan or Woden. And it's kind of a similar pronunciation there. And Wotan is an ancient Germanic god. So the Odin that we have through Norse spirituality and heathenry, modern day heathenry, is a little bit of a reconstructionist from the old, it's actually called Germanicus. So that was an area of, like, they were called the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Lombards, Ostrogoths. There was a lot of different names for them, but most of us probably know Vandals. And we have modern slang as Vandal as someone who goes around and destroys things and pillages things. So that's kind of where the word Vandal came from. They're an old Germanic tribe. So the old Germanicus kind of takes up, so if you look at like a map of Europe, right? You have the map of Europe, and then you have the northern British Isles where you have, like Scotland and Ireland over here, and then you have like France and Germany and everywhere over here, and then you have up here, you have like Sweden and Norway and like Sweden, Norway, you have even the Danish people, that sort of area, right? And so Germanicus took up the upper eastern half of Europe, of ancient Europe. And so you have these 2 main warring people at the time. You have the Celts, which made up of ancient Ireland and Scotland and, the UK kind of area. And then you also have the Germanicus people, which took up like Sweden, Finland, Norway, all of the Danish people, and then you also have below that the upper eastern crust of Europe, which includes, it even includes areas with where the Baltics were. So you have like this, you have these two different sides to ancient Europe, and you have the Celtics over here, and then you have the Germanicus over here, right? And so the ancient people that we're really talking about today is not the Celts, and not the Celts, it's the ancient Germanic people. And then, we have the migration of the Germanic people into Ireland and Scotland. They take over, and, they go back and forth, and it kind of, through time, they kind of mix together. And so a lot of Irish and Scottish people have Nordic kind of blood in them because of, they were constantly at war and trying to take over one another, which is pretty much what people back then did. There was no television, or there was no computer games, there was no watching the Summer of Magic. All they had was basically war, and that was, what they did, right? And so Odin that we know of today is based off of Wotan, but I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the old Wotan. You can go in and do some research on that. There's really not that much information out there. Where we start getting more of the information is through the Nordic Reconstructionist period, which is more around so we have the ancient Germanic people, which is 1500 to 1000 kind of BC time zone. And then we have the Reconstructionist around 1000 AD, 1500 AD, somewhere between there. So we have a good, a 3,000 year span from where we have the ancient Germanic tribes that kind of turn, and then, everybody kind of settles down, and we have Europe as we know it, and then we have the Celtic Isles as we know it, and then we have, the Nordic kind of people as we know it, and it separates into three different types of people instead of the two main people. And then you had, the Romans and the Italian down below and everything like that. But at the time, there was the two main powers, which kind of settled down to about the three main powers. And when that happened around 1000 AD, between 1000 AD, 1200 AD, somewhere around there. Jennifer says I'm a bit familiar, but I've never worked with him. He stops by on occasion, Brittany says. Victoria says I've never worked with him, brand new. Elizabeth says, I'm a little familiar with him, but I've never worked with him. I studied Norse mythology as a senior in high school. Wow, that would have been so cool. I really wish, my high school had things like that. That would have been awesome. Susan says, never worked with him, but I know a little about him. Marissa says, I have a connection to him through an ancestral guide. Yeah. Jessica says, have not worked with him, but you think he would make a wonderful counterpart to your matron goddess. Pillaging and raiding. I may have watched too many Vikings. It's a really good show. And side tangent here, the reason why I wanted to do Odin, I just give you a personal story really quickly, is because I recently did the 23andMe Ancestry DNA test because, as I get older, I want to know more about where I came from. I want to know more about my heritage and my people. And I live in America, and, I'll just briefly talk about this, but I think a lot of American witches can relate, is that we don't, we have the religion of America, which is not the official religion, but it's kind of the unofficial religion, Christianity. But it's a really oppressive and tyrannical religion, and, a lot of American pagans and heathens are searching for something more than that. And so we have kind of in America right now, since probably the 1960s, 1970s with the New Age kind of movement, we have this sort of Renaissance Reconstructionist thing going on in America right now, where Americans are rejecting the country's religion because it's oppressive and tyrannical, and we're starting to search more about our heritage, because I think in a lot of ways, those of you who aren't American probably have some ideas and thoughts about what American people are. We're usually seen as greedy or aggressive or, oppressive in some ways, or we think we're better than everybody else and things like that. And for a really long time, patriotism was a really real thing. And that was pretty much all we had, because we're a fairly new country. We don't have a very positive history of our own. In fact, the history that we do have basically just entails of us murdering lots of people to set up our, encampments wherever we felt like we wanted to. And so our history, a lot of Americans are rejecting it right now. And they are looking at, okay, so if we're rejecting the American spirituality or religion, where do we go from there? And a lot of us are starting to take like the 23andMe tests and things like that to kind of figure out like where did we come from? What is our traditional heritage? What are our traditional religions that, we come from and we have an ancestral connection to. And ancestral healing has been like such a important part of my healing journey. And I have definitely worked a lot on healing my intermediate, like my grandmothers, my aunts, my uncles, even my great grandmothers and great grandfathers. I've really worked on healing that line, and I feel pretty good at where it's at. But when it comes to ancestral healing, you can always go back further and further and further. And I think part of having an identity in this world, your own individual identity and having your own cultural identity is some like I feel like Americans have a void there, and I feel like that's a big reason why they try to conquer everybody else, or why they seem so aggressive, is because it's a projection of their shadow, because they don't have a connection to their innate indigenous people. And so a lot of people right now are starting to awaken to that and starting this whole revival where we have reconstructionists from, Northern Europe kind of indigenous tribes and things like that. So I took the test and I found out that I'm like a good 40% of Nordic people. Like I have a lot of Swedish, I have a lot of Danish, a lot of Norwegian, a lot of Finnish, like that's where pretty much all of my ancestry is from. And then I also have some Celtic, which is British Isles, which is the Ireland, Scotland, that kind of area. And then even more interesting, I also found out that I have ancestors from the Middle East, Iran. And then I had no idea, but I'm also what's called a Métis, which is someone who is from, it's kind of like a mixed person from basically, I won't go into too much because we'll get off on a whole new tangent that was like not anything to do with today. But it's really interesting. I had no idea that these people even existed, let alone that I was part of them. I found out that I'm part of the Ojibwe tribe, and part of my ancestry through my father is one of my great grandmothers, which is Ojibwe woman, and she married the French settlers, and then there's a whole line of people that are mixed, Native American, Inuit, and Native American, Northern Canadian, Native American, and French. And so that's one of my most recent familiar lines that I have. And it makes sense because I've always been really attracted to Native American spirituality and things like that. Anyways, but so it has led me on this journey to seek out like who am I? And because a lot of my heritage comes from the Nordic peoples, one of the places that I'm starting first, and actually the Sami people, I don't know if you guys have heard of those people, they're the reindeer people. If you look on my 23andMe map, it shows like a huge concentration of where the Sami people are. So that's been one of my ways that I've been working on my ancestral line of healing. But one of my first stops on my tour of my heritage is the Nordic peoples and the Norse religion. And so that's why I had chose Odin, because he's kind of the starting point, and I'm going to talk about the origin myth of, the creation myth of Odin and Norse people and things like that. But I think it's really interesting, and I would highly encourage anybody who's interested in finding out what your actual heritage is to do one of the Ancestry or 23andMe, because it has been so enlightening. Like in my 20s, I just kind of worked with anybody. I just kind of worked with whoever was, calling me, and whoever I felt like was really interesting to me. I worked with the Greek pantheon. I worked a little bit, tiny bit with the Egyptian pantheon. Not too much, but I mostly worked with the Greek pantheon. And now in my 30s, I find myself really being called to check out the Norse pantheon and to start honestly with Odin. So when I was putting together this presentation today, I was learning along with you guys, and I was really surprised at what I found, and I'm really excited to kind of share that with you guys. Hey Janet, hey Jen, hey Freya, good to see you guys. Jen says, I was surprised with my ancestry DNA, right? Victoria, Iran or Persia. So I'm actually from the area that is the ancient Assyrians, which is around today. It's not exactly, I'm not exactly from Iran, but like the area that I'm from is where Palestine and Iran is. So kind of like around that area. So if you look at my map on Ancestry, it shows like mostly in present day Iran, but where ancient Assyria was, the ancient Assyrians. Jen says, I was Southern Native American, lots of family in Puerto Rico who came from Senegal, Africa. That's really freaking cool. Do you want to build a snowman? I actually grew up in the desert, Brittany, and so I really didn't know what snow was until I moved to Missouri. And now I actually find, weirdly, oddly enough, that I actually prefer the cold, that I have a very extreme low, now that I'm out of the desert and out of the 120-degree heat of the Mojave Desert. I really cannot stand the heat anymore. I really can't. And it's so funny because my husband thinks I'm crazy, because I'll go outside in the snow in flip-flops and shorts and a tank top, and like I'm okay. I'm fine with it. Like it's like my body is built for that. But when it comes to the heat, like I just have no tolerance for it anymore. But you're so funny. Hey Leonie, good to see you guys. All right, so let's get into it. I'm sure you're just itching to get into who Odin is. So to understand Odin, we really have to kind of start with the Norse creation myth. So, and I'm going to try not to butcher any of these words. I'm still kind of learning. So if this is like your thing and you're like cringing at how I pronounce the words, I'm so sorry, but I am trying and I am learning. So in the beginning of the formation of the universe and the formation of the world, okay, there were two primordial forces. There was the primordial force of fire, also known as Muspelheim, and you had the primordial force of ice, which is Niflheim. And so you have fire and ice on either side. And in between the fire and the ice, you have this primordial void, darkness and emptiness. And this void is called Ginnungagap. And eventually, through millennia, these forces of fire and ice, they kind of inch their way across the void to one another. And when this happened, the ice began to melt, and the ice began to create streams. And as the ice also melted, the fire, right? So you have the ice kind of like cooling down the fire, you have land starting to be created here. And so what we have in the middle of this primordial fire and ice is we have streams of water and we have hard rock. And in these streams of water, the first giant named Ymir was born. And Ymir was very destructive, and he was a terrifying being. Ymir was also I'm going to butcher this. He was a hermaphrodite. And so he had both male and he had female reproductive systems. And over millennia, Ymir duplicated himself over and over and over. And as he did this, he would create giants. And these giants would roam the land and roam the seas. Now, we could look at this as like dinosaurs. We could look at like the formation of the earth, and we could look at the dinosaurs and the earth, life coming out of the oceans, like starting in the oceans, these big terrifying giants, these big sharks and dinosaurs and things like that. And then we can also see them, as these dinosaurs and beings kind of leaving the ocean through evolution as we know it. And as the frost melted a great cow emerged from the ice, and her name was Adhumla. And by the sustenance of the salt in the oceans, she would lick the salt from the oceans, the salt that kind of attached itself to the rocky beds of the oceans. She would sustain herself. And all of the giants, including Ymir, would suckle from her, and her milk would sustain them. And as this cow kept licking and licking at the salt, from her licking, a new being was formed. And this being was named Buri. And he was uncovered, and he became the first of the Aesir tribe. And Buri married and procreated with the other giants in the realm, and several generations down the line, each generation removing the giants further and further and further from their divinity, further and further and further from their giantness, until 3 sons were born. And these 3 sons were named Odin, Vili, and Ve. Now, you have to remember that Ymir was a terrifying giant, and Ymir kept his sons and daughters stupid and ignorant. Odin and his 2 brothers rebelled against their great-grandfather, and they killed Ymir. They murdered him. And from Ymir's corpse, they created oceans from his blood. They turned his hair into the forest and vegetation. And they formed the clouds from his brains. The soil, the earth, was built from his muscles. And the dome of the sky was fashioned from his skull. Then, Odin and his brothers formed the first man and woman, Ask and Embla, and they formed them from old, rotted out, dead ash trees. And they built a safe haven surrounded by giant walls around Ask and Embla, and they named this place Midgard. And they did this to protect them from the tyrannical giants, all of their aunts and uncles and cousins that were out roaming around. They built this safe haven, this safe place for Ask and Embla. And Odin and his brothers then, at that point, was a turning point, because previously the world was just in chaos, right? There was no order. So Odin created order. And actually, order, he didn't create order, he created balance. So order and chaos are primordial things that exist. But what he did is he created balance by protecting Ask and Embla from chaos. And so from there, Ask and Embla then became the father and the mother of modern day humans. And I'm sure that this story sounds really familiar, right? Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. How many of you guys can see that correlation? Oh, thank you, Kana. Nellie says the Nordic people is not a generic group. Odin is part of the Scandinavian heritage, but we Finns and Sami have our own separate heritage that has nothing to do with any of that. Yeah, I'm going to definitely look into it, and I'm just, like I said, I'm just at the very, tippy top of everything, and there's a lot to it. So at this point, Odin then became the ruler of the Aesir, and after he had set up Ask and Embla to be safe in their own little protective garden, he then turned into a hermit, and he began just wandering around the 9 worlds of Yggdrasil, which is the tree of wisdom, which you guys have seen that model, that archetype, I'm sure many times. It's the 9 worlds of the Yggdrasil tree. And what's said about Odin is that he's a shapeshifter, and he's also a trickster. So Odin will sometimes go around appearing as different versions of masculinity. So sometimes we'll see him as a feeble old man, and other times appearing as like a young adolescent boy. And he really had a fondness for humans. So if we think about, back to how he rebelled against his great-grandfather, and he created order from the chaos, he kind of really loved humans, didn't he? He loved humanity. He loved the idea of humanity. And he really loved to walk amongst humankind. He liked to interact with humankind. He liked to kind of appear as a human. And so, there's this wisdom out there that the beggar on the street that you see, the tramp on the street that you see, could be Odin, and so it's like you want to give coins to them because you never know who it could be. Or the young boy that's, out and playing, be nice to, basically be nice to everybody, because you never know if it could be a god that's impersonating a human. And on his shoulders, most of you know that he's the god of ravens, right? So he has two ravens that follow him, and they actually sit in either shoulder with him. And that kind of comes from the Wotan Germanic myth, because Wotan was the god of war, and we know that ravens are basically war birds. They're carrion, right? We usually see them. They're scavengers. We usually see them pecking at the dead bodies and things like that. So ravens, same with the Morrigan, same kind of thing there. And we see ravens associated with Odin mostly because of the war aspect, and that's just kind of something that followed through with the Reconstructionists. And so what would happen with the two ravens? They were a very integral part of Odin's lore. And you have the two ravens named Hugin and Munin. And every morning they fly around the entire world, and by the next morning at breakfast they are back again. And so they fly around the whole world and they learn of all of the world's secrets. They learn of what's going on. So they're kind of like the newspaper for Odin. He reads the newspaper in the morning, but it's the ravens that are whispering of everything that goes on in his ears. And so one thing about Odin that we can gain from this myth. So Odin rejected, his great-grandfather. He rejected ignorance. He rejected the ferality of his ancestors. And he really believed in seeking wisdom at all costs. He felt that, seeking wisdom and seeking information, being in the know, like continuing to evolve and learn things was the way to be. That was like what he really was the god of knowledge and wisdom and seeking wisdom. And he truly believed that seeking wisdom at all costs is how you are going to become a good person, or someone that would maybe earn their place in Valhalla other than being a warrior of sorts. And so the type of person that Odin would actually trick. So he was a trickster god, and so he would trick people, with his human form. But also on top of that, he was kind of seen as a god that most people didn't actually want anything to do with, because he was kind of unpredictable. You didn't know what kind of aspect of Odin you were going to get. So it wasn't that people actually worshipped Odin or anything like that. Odin just kind of existed. He was just kind of always there. He was all-knowing, and he was kind of like orchestrating everything. And one thing that Odin absolutely believed in is seeking wisdom at all costs. And the type of person who would actually, get punished or tricked by Odin are the type of people that would remain willfully ignorant, that wouldn't try to understand or comprehend other people's sides of things, or who would be so strict in their perspective of everything. And another myth for Odin that a lot of you tarot readers will think of, how many of you know which card in the tarot, which major arcana that Odin is associated with in the tarot deck? Write in the comments below what you think, which card. Yeah, Kana says many creation stories are very similar. They are, right? Kana says in Yoruba culture, Ogun is known very similarly. It's said you should be give to beggars for the same reason, because it may be Ogun. That's neat. That's really neat. Hey, Kimberly, good to see you. Yeah, connection to ravens. Thank you, Jessica. The Emperor? Could be the Emperor. The Hangman, yeah. So, and I'm going to tell you which myth. So, absolutely, there's actually no wrong answer, because tarot wasn't really based on any type of mythology. Well, it was, but not really like, the tarot deck that we know today, at least the Rider-Waite system, is a conglomeration, and it's actually a conglomeration with a Christian Gnostic kind of overlay on top of it. So there's actually no wrong answer. But the one that I was looking for is the Hanged Man. The Magician would also be a really, really good one. Yeah, the Magician would be an excellent. The Magician, it just depends, like, you guys are all right. And it just depends on which aspect of Odin you might actually be working with, right? But yeah, the Magician, the Emperor, and the Hangman are all awesome, awesome answers. So the myth that I actually want to talk about for the Hangman is the myth that most people probably associate with Odin, even if you don't know much about Odin. And he might be the most famous for his sacrifice on the world tree. And so there is a myth that Odin sacrificed himself on the world tree, Yggdrasil, and what he did is he pierced himself with his own spear. And he hung there for 9 days and 9 nights. And he did that to receive the wisdom of the runes for divination. And with the magic of the, not just for divination, but for magic, they're not just a divinatory tool. They are a system of magic. They each hold their own magical kind of correspondence. And so with the magic of the runes and being able to use them for divination is kind of like a new concept that we do now. But the magic in general of the runes, he sacrificed himself on the world tree, pierced himself with his own spear, hung for 9 days and 9 nights. And after that happened, he kind of went through, it was kind of like what shamans do when they go into a trance, when they fast, they go into the forest or the mountains and they don't eat, kind of like what Jesus did where he walked the desert for, 40 days and 40 nights. Similar story, just kind of recapped over and over. But it's where the shaman will go into like this sort of trance, this near-death experience to have some sort of wisdom revealed unto them. And so this is the Odin mythology where he sacrificed himself. And if you work with the tarot, you might look at the Hanged Man a little bit differently in tarot. So some words that come up with Hangman is sacrifice or martyr or delays, or, you know, in terms of like an adjective, like something that's going to be delayed, there no progress can be made, something else might have to happen first before this other thing can happen. So you could also look at it, there is another Renaissance kind of meaning to it, where you would have like thief, like this is more like the reversed hangman, where you would think about it like someone who's like a thief, or someone who's stealing someone, or someone who's being punished for something, right? And then you also have the Odin myth, which is really cool to kind of overlay on top of it, and it makes it out to be a little bit of a different meaning of martyrdom, right? And sacrificing oneself to learn something, or to sacrifice oneself in the promise of power in the future, the power to control the natural magical forces, right? So it's pretty neat. And one thing that's clear about Odin is that he is not a savior. So don't try to overlay any type of Messiah myth onto him. He's not a savior. He didn't do it for mankind. He did it for himself. And Odin is kind of seen as a selfish god. He's probably one of the most selfish gods. And what I get from that myth, what I get from the Odin myth of him hanging himself on the tree, is that he requires us to save ourselves. He's not our savior, but he requires us to save ourselves through obtaining knowledge, right? By seeking true wisdom with both the left-handed path and the right-handed path. So this is kind of where I was talking about previously on the other live stream, where I'm going to be talking about the left hand and the right hand path. And so in modern day spirituality, we have kind of like this, we have these kind of two paths that are most common for us to think about, especially in terms of like Western spirituality, the Western revival. And we have these ideas of the left hand path, and we have these ideas of the right hand path. So I want to know from you guys in the comments below. We'll start with the right hand path because that seems to be like the easiest that most of us are familiar with. So put some comments in the box below. Let me know, what are some words that you associate with the right hand path? What are some words that you associate with the right hand path? It could just be some simple ideas, and really dig into like what are some cultural ideas about that. So whether you have specific ideas about it or whether you kind of just are putting it together based on what you think, based on like the culture you grew up, or how involved you are with your own spiritual path and what other people have said. I'm curious what you guys think. What does the right hand path mean to you? I'll give Facebook a few minutes to kind of catch up because there's always like a 60-second. I'm always 60 seconds like ahead of you guys. Has such good tea. So good. So I will tell you some of the words that I associate with the right hand path. Good. Love and light. White magic. What are some other words that you guys associate with right hand path? Who's going to be brave? The creative path. Very good. Very good, Kana. The creative path. What about masculine? Was that a word that we could associate with the right hand path? Good. Maybe proper are some words that kind of come to mind. Marissa says, I was taught that it concerns building relationships with the spirits and being a person who can handle power. Very good. Yeah. Very good. So, how many of you are more familiar with the term left-hand path versus right-hand path? And how many of you would say that you have a little bit of a negative connotation when it comes to what the left-hand path is? So put in the comment box below, what are some of your ideas, concepts, words that you associate with the left-hand path? I'll tell you some of mine. Bad, selfish, power, evil, in a lot of literature, especially New Age literature, we're going to see left-hand path associated with Luciferianism or even Satanism, right? So we have kind of like these cultural concepts of the right hand and the left-hand path. Yeah. Marissa says yes, because left hand is applied, healing, affecting, could also include protection or cursing. Yeah. Yep. So I am of the mindset that the two ravens that work with Odin, Hugin and Munin, are associated with the right hand and the left hand path. Now, we have to understand that early paganism and early heathenry did not differentiate between good and evil. They only had chaos and order. So this whole mythos and this whole idea of this war of good versus evil, we're constantly at war. That's really more associated with the Christian mythology and not even, and a little bit with the Jewish mythology, but it's really the Abrahamic religions that we start seeing this emergence of the drama of good versus evil. Previously to then, there really wasn't a concept of good versus evil being at war. There was simply, order and chaos. That's kind of what they had as far as like the forces of the world. Paula, undisciplined. That's a good word. Kana says, I also just realized in biblical terms, I noticed that Jesus sat at the right-hand side. And also they cast the nets to the right-hand side while fishing. Interesting. Rissa says, is that Christian? Right. And so when we think about the right-hand path, we have a lot of theology kind of thrown on us from the Christian religions, and it does a number on us. It does a lot of, a number on us psychologically. We have, this is where we can talk about things like feminism. We can talk about things like obedience. We can talk about things like the oppressive and tyrannical aspects of the religion. And it kind of bleeds into modern day paganism, and it also bleeds into modern day like heathenism. There's a lot of love and light people that want nothing at all ever to do with anything from the left-hand path. Period. It's evil, and what people have to realize is the New Age movement. It's Christian in nature. It is. Even if you look at Wicca, Wicca is Christian in nature. It's a gnosis, right? And I know some some Wiccans might be a little upset about that, but it's true. It's revolving around the Trinity. It's a pagan version of Catholicism in some ways, right? A lot of the symbolism is the same, the chalice, things like that, the Holy Grail. It is based off of Christian gnosis. And so when we start thinking about like the law of three, the reed, what you do comes back to you times three and things like that. Even Wiccans and even a lot of witches are also really divided between the right hand and the left hand path. And Odin, working with Odin, I have found, and in my own personal practice this to be true, is that proper knowledge, like really understanding the universe, really understanding the forces that are out there, the forces that be, is somewhere in the middle. And it's not with the right hand path, and it's not necessarily with the left hand path. It's not with the white magic, it's not with the black magic, it's with the gray magic. And I think a lot of us here identify as gray magicians, right? So let me know if you identify as a gray magician, where you know about curses, you know about hexes, you know about using spell work and magic and divination for power, but you also know about the right hand path of, don't try not to hurt people that don't deserve it at the very least, turn the other cheek, that kind of theology. Yeah. And so for the right hand path, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about a different way to kind of look at it. Let's get rid of this whole good and evil kind of thing, because that's a little simplistic. It's a little narrow, isn't it? And it's a little too much based off Christianity and the Abrahamic religions. So with the right hand path, I think about the group coming before the self, right? The best for the group versus the best for the self. It's a little sacrificial in some ways. Also, the right hand path is kind of associated with listening to spiritual leaders, like listening to gurus and priests and, all the people that have, like, even priestesses, the people that have been initiated, right? So it has a hierarchy to it. Also, I think about the right hand path as collective development, sort of like a utopian kind of thinking. Like, how are we going to make the world better for everybody? How are we going to cure world poverty and hunger? And how are we going to help the oceans and things like that? That's a very right-handed path-oriented way of thinking. It's also a world-denying view in that it talks more about like not indulging in your senses, right? Abstinence, abstaining from things, not being hedonistic in any way. It talks more about the promise of some sort of, spiritual or type of religious reward from abstaining from earthly pleasures. It also talks about the elevation of the spiritual self. It talks about, the spiritual self is more important than the physical self. It's a very physical denying type of view. And it's also, where it's also thinking about things and like no one deserves capital punishment or, like things like that. Like there is no eye for an eye type of way of thinking about things. We always do what we want to embody and model, right? Even if people might deserve it, we still abstain from indulging in those lower chakra based kind of pleasures or like even just revenge, you know, just wanting to get revenge. We abstain from that. Yeah. Mario says that gray, yes, gray, but like my vacations at both polarities. Yeah. Jen says being responsible for your own shit. Protective stuff. Yeah, protective. The middle path. My path would definitely be more gray. Mine too. So that's kind of what I think about like the right hand path. You know, like putting everybody before yourself, not indulging in earthly pleasures, the elevation of the spiritual self versus the physical self, no vindication, no seeking justice, just you know, living by laws and obedience and things like that. Which is, you know, that's okay because we need the right hand path. We need to be able, you know, that's how we get further along. That's how we create social systems. That's how we erase poverty and world hunger and things like that. Like there is a place and time for the right hand path, but the left hand path is definitely the more seductive path, isn't it? It is. And some ways that I think about the left hand path is, so we have the right hand path, which is like group oriented, like what's better for the group. And with the left hand path, we have more of the idea of what's better for the individual, you know? Like the group might benefit in some way from this, but also I have my own personal wants, needs, and desires. So why should I have to give up what I want or need or desire to make the group happy, right? The left-hand path is more free thinking. So we think about the right-hand path and we talk about like, you know, gurus and priests and priestesses and learning through a hierarchy, and there's a spiritual hierarchy to it. The left-hand path is more like you are your own priestess. You are your own priest. You're your own authority on spirituality. You don't have to go to a priest to confess your sins, you know, be absolved from your sins. You have the ability to do that for yourself. And it's more free thinking, right? It's like, so with the right hand path, you're kind of told what to think based on what the group feels is the best. And then the left hand path, you have free thinking, meaning that you have your own opinion about things, meaning that you can come to your own decision about what's right and what's wrong, or what's proper and what's not proper. And it may be at odds with the group collective. With the left-hand path, you're also more about self-development versus like collective development. So instead of like, for example, an example of that would be like if you had a family and a mother had several sons and daughters. She only had enough money to send one son or daughter to college or something like that. And the collective, the right-hand pathway of dealing with that would be, you know, the smartest one, the one that shows the most aptitude. Well, logically, you know, that should be the one that goes to college. Whereas the left-hand path is more like, okay, now you have a chance to prove yourself, right? So maybe she makes them do something, or maybe they have to do an essay, or maybe, you know, it's based off of like who was the firstborn, you know what I mean? So it's a little bit more emotional as far as like the different types of paths. And then you also have, whereas the right hand path is more like a world denying view, meaning like it talks about abstaining, it talks about not indulging in the earthly pleasures, about like spiritual cleanliness. The left-hand path really talks about more like indulging in earthly pleasures, using your senses and enjoying the things that we have to enjoy on this earth, and being a little hedonistic, being a little indulgent. And it talks about more like, you know, the right-hand path is more like the elevation of like your spiritual self, the self that is world denying, and then the left-hand path really talks about the elevation of the physical self, the physical reality, the 3D reality. So we have like the right hand path is like the 5D reality, and then the left hand path is like the 3D reality. And so modern Christian religions and the Abrahamic religions kind of define like good and evil as pertinent as part of their religious structure. And it's actually that has labeled the left-hand path as evil or demonic, right? Demonic. And the right-hand path as good or divine. And another way that you could actually look at this is the right hand path being the logical part of your brain, and the left hand path of being the more emotional side of your brain, right? And so what it really means is that to fully understand the nature of the universe and to understand the nature of ourselves, we must be willing to kind of walk between those paths and to walk actually both paths depending on the situation and what's going on. So we have to be willing to kind of follow both paths to really seek wisdom, especially with Odin. And both the path of the individual, the left hand that thinks for themselves, that prioritizes themselves at the cost of others if necessary, who indulges in their senses in the material world, and who rebels against tradition that is corrupt or an enemy of progression, and to also follow the path of the collective, to rise to higher and more righteous ideas, to follow tradition, to be the bigger person when it comes to conflict, because it can't be just war all the time, right? Sometimes we have to be the bigger person. But it also means to be someone who indulges in earthly pleasures but doesn't become dependent or an addict. That's important. Be someone who thinks for themselves but also hears the wisdom from their elders, hears the collective wisdom. Someone who is ready for war and can fight, but to also be reluctant to fight, and only if the situation really calls for it. And to be both the dark and the light, the left hand and the right hand path. And there's a quote that I have for you. I don't know who said it. I tried to find this quote, who said this, but it is, you can get anywhere hopping on one foot, but you'll get there faster if you run using both legs. So what do you guys think? Jessica says nature is both. Yes. Elizabeth says, listening to you, I definitely have been raised in a more right-handed way, but it definitely has problems. I definitely lean much more middle now. Yeah. Magician. Yeah. The higher and the lower, he has the staff in one hand and he's pointing down to the earth, and it's him that transmute the higher and lower energies. And actually I'm slowly working on the Major Arcana series on my YouTube, and the Magician is next, and I actually talk about some of the symbolism, the left hand path and the right hand path with the Magician. So yeah, so whoever said Magician for Odin, absolutely. The Hangman, yes. The Emperor, all of those are excellent tarot cards to work with the energy of Odin. And, speaking of the Emperor, we can look at the Emperor as the wise protector with the right hand path, or the tyrannical ruler, with the left hand path, if those energies aren't balanced. Yeah. So really, really good stuff here. Does anybody have any comments or questions, or do you guys want to tell me what you got out of this? What has been the most memorable thing for you? And so here's the question, the secret question that I have. I will be announcing 3 more winners to win some workshops with me next Friday. And I have also a spread that I'm going to be giving you. So don't go anywhere yet. I'm going to be giving that to you in just a moment. So stay here with me just a couple more minutes. And so my question for you guys is, how would the world be a better place if we were both the right hand and the left hand path? What do these paths have to learn from one another? And how would we be more of a balanced world if we decided to not repress one or the other? So that's my question to you. How would the world be a better place if we balanced the left hand and the right hand path? So if you want to win a workshop, go ahead and answer that below. I'll be checking back in with you guys next week. So for the tarot spread that I have for you guys, I actually have, it's a 3-card spread. All right, let me know in the comments below if you can see this spread. I'm going to go over it very briefly with you, and then I'm going to give you guys the link to where you can download it. So the spread is called Odin's Ravens. Now, this is a tarot spread. You can also use oracle cards to consult Hugin and Munin to reveal the truth of a situation. So, if you are in a situation or you need to make a decision one way or another, and you're not really sure if you can make sense out of what your heart says and what your head says, this is the spread that you can use for that. So, the first position is, number one, you consult Hugin, the logical side of the situation, the right-handed path side of the situation. And I noticed that I actually put those backwards, that's fine. Oh well. In a perfect world, I maybe would have thought about putting Moonin on the left-hand side and Hugin on the right-hand side, but we'll just have to work with it. So the first card is consult Hugin, the logical side of a situation. Number two, consult Moonin, the emotional side of a situation. And then the card in the middle is the truth, what the situation truly, truly is. Okay? You guys like it. You guys like it. Awesome. Okay, so let me get the link. Don't go anywhere. Let me grab the link and I will get this to you guys. There's nothing you have to do to get it. You just download it straight from the link. And if you guys really enjoyed the Summer of Magic, listen, I want to invite you to check out the Make Terror Your Business Mentorship Program. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this today, but I really do want you to check this out. If you want to be a teacher, if you want to get up in front of people, if you want to do live streams, if you want to start talking about gods and goddesses or magical topics like this, and you want to start teaching people and educating people, this is what I specialize in as a coach. I specialize in teaching you how to market yourself online as a tarot reader or spiritual life coach. But more of the advanced modules of the Make Terror Your Business Mentorship Program really talks about, how to come up with content like this, how to do live streams. There's templates to follow. There's scripts that you can use. There's all of my best tips, tricks, secrets when it comes to online marketing and coming up with content that's actually going to get people engaged in what you have to say, to inspire people, right? That's what the Make Terror Your Business Mentorship Program is all about. So I want to give you guys the link to check that out really quickly. And I will be giving out 2 scholarships on July 1st. There is a post that is pinned in the group right now, in the Profitable Psychic group, where I'm actually giving away a full ride scholarship for the mentorship program. And I'm giving away a full ride scholarship from my 6-month program, which is going to teach you how to shift from tarot reader to spiritual life coach. So if you are interested in taking this program, but you don't think that you can come up with the money, then you have an opportunity to win. But if you know that this is what you really want to do, you're on the psychic hotlines, you're making money, let's say you're making like a good $1,000 to $2,000 a month, you want to learn how to make $5,000, $10,000 a month, and you want to really maybe one day open up a school or open up an academy, or you want to start getting paid to teach other people about paganism or your spiritual path, or even teach people how to read tarot for money, that's where I can come in and that's where I can help you. Marissa says, Make Terror Your Business is such an amazing program. I was terrified to do this stuff. Thank you. You're so welcome. You're so welcome. Yeah. Getting out the oracle cards. All right, guys, I will see you in the group. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video.